Welcome back to another episode of the Chief of Staff Show. I'm your host, Melanie Jones, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Sawyer Middeleer, who is the Chief of Staff at Aomni, an innovative AI B2B SaaS startup. He's been there a little over a year now, focused on their 0 to 1 go-to-market motion. So today we're going to dive into his journey and what it's like to be a Chief of Staff at such a fast-paced AI startup. Sawyer, welcome to the Chief of Staff Show.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So you've been at Aomni for a little over a year now. And I know no 2 days are ever the same, but what's a typical week like? What are some of the typical things that you're doing as a chief of staff there?
Yeah, so let's see. No 2 days really are ever alike. Let's see. I'd say right now, because we're a small company, about 5 people, looking to grow probably to 7 or 8 in the next 3 to 6 months or so. But I'm really the only non-technical person at the company. So my job actually is a lot of, at the moment, operations, of course, strategy, and then sales and go-to-market. So cover everything from customer facing. I'm usually the first person that a new customer will talk to. I'm somebody that they'll come to for questions, product questions, tech support, etc. But then I'm also behind the scenes sort of building out all of our operational systems, understanding our customer metrics, product usage metrics, and then it being kind of the connective tissue between our team of engineers and product people and designers, the actual kind of customer conversations that we have and the things that they're asking us for, confused about, that kind of thing.
That's really cool. So you were part of the founding team there then?
Yeah, the first employee, I guess you could say. So myself and then one other engineer started on the same day. Yeah, so Omni was founded by just a solo founder. His name's David. He launched the company on Twitter in April of 2023, I think, when it was basically a tech demo, kind of like Perplexity, as from like a product perspective. Went pretty viral on Twitter, got a bunch of customers, got a lot of investor interest. And so at that point, it really became a real company. And he was building it for a little bit by himself and then brought me on to sort of help with refining go-to-market and kind of really niching down to understand what types of users were getting the most value out of the product, who would pay for it, interviewing folks, doing market research, all of that stuff, which I did kind of on a fractional basis, and then joined full-time once we raised a pre-seed round.
I love that. So it's really cool that he saw the value in such an early hire being a chief of staff. Some people sort of have a misconception that you need a staff to have a chief of staff. It's I wish we could get some awareness around that. But it's really, I love when I see founders, especially technical founders, who are like, I need a chief of staff like as soon as possible. So that's really cool that he brought you on super early. Have there been any sort of like challenges with being the only operator type of role at your company?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges is the fact that we're building everything from scratch. And so there really are no systems. And I think the mindset that a lot of chiefs of staff bring to their work is, hey, how can I take this thing that's done, maybe manually or inefficiently, or sort of take this process that has a lot of stakeholders and better align it, better coordinate it, make it more scalable and efficient. But that's not really the kind of problem set that I work on, because we have some systems, but not too many. I mean, they're not the sort of thing that you actually need a full-time person to build out and optimize. And really what I'm focused on from like a systems perspective is making sure that our feedback loops from the kind of customer and go-to-market side and the product and engineering side are really tight, so that we're able to maximize the limited resources we have to the fullest extent. So embracing that mindset is definitely somewhat challenging, because I had come from startups, but larger startups before. And so it is a different way of thinking about building a company. And then the second thing is the fact that my role is a lot more kind of go-to-market oriented than a lot of chiefs of staff. This is something that, people say, like, at a startup, in an early stage startup, you're either building or you're selling the product. And that's like 100% true. And like, while I am doing a lot of operational things, I'd say at least 50, probably closer to 75 or more percent of my time, depending on the day or the week, is spent either selling, doing customer support, or marketing. And that was something that I had never really had too much exposure to before. And it was quite a learning curve, a bit uncomfortable at first. But I've gotten better at it.
Yeah. And I'm always telling people the chief of staff role, one, it really varies depending on what the organization needs. So, like, you are going in and just creating everything from scratch, as opposed to other people who might be going in and refining or improving systems. So, yeah, it's crazy how much, disparity there is in what you might be doing in the chief of staff role. But regardless, you're wearing a ton of hats. So whether you're at a big company, a small company, sounds like you have sales, go to market, marketing, customer support, like doing all of the things. What are some of the parts of it that you're most passionate about?
Yeah. Yes. Wearing all the hats, doing all the things. I really love. I'm actually surprised at how much I enjoy being customer facing. My background prior to doing anything in tech actually was in public policy and like community engagement, urban planning, and that sort of work, of course, is very stakeholder facing, and so I enjoy getting to do a little bit of that or like approach like sales and support from that perspective. So that's been really fun actually. And then otherwise, I really love of course the system building and the sort of building automations. I've been spending a lot of time trying to scale myself and kind of make it so that I don't get bogged down in so many little tasks. And really maximize my time and the founder David's time. And so what that usually means is automating reporting, automating communication, basically trying to do as much as possible so that we can focus our time on high priority stuff. And I always enjoy that. I mean, I've been, spending my sort of nights and weekends like tinkering on various like coding projects and things like that for as long as I can remember. And so getting to use that at work is fun.
Yeah, I love that. And that is one of the like key things that ties all chief of staff roles together. It is about optimizing time and like reducing inefficiencies and um so yeah, that's just an interesting sort of through line for all of the chiefs of staff that I speak to and work with and meet. So you mentioned that you started in public policy. I'm always telling people there's no one path to becoming a chief of staff. Like chiefs of staff come from such a variety of backgrounds. So I'm interested, you were in public policy. What drew you to a chief of staff role?
Yeah, my career path is super weird, honestly. So when I started grad school, I'd come from kind of urban planning and commercial real estate and community engagement, and I wanted to do that kind of at a larger scale. But in grad school, I really found a love of social entrepreneurship and just entrepreneurship in general. Did an internship with a consulting firm slash venture fund that did a lot of regulatory work with early stage startups. So like a lot of like telemedicine and energy and transportation and robotics and things like that, and really enjoyed that a lot. And so that kind of pushed me to think, actually, I know I was doing a lot of policy work, but maybe product or something like that is actually what I would enjoy. But I graduated grad school into the pandemic, and so everything sort of got shaken up, and all my plans were thrown out of the window. And I wound up at an e-commerce company, an e-commerce startup, as a brand manager, or so essentially I had a collection of e-commerce brands that we had acquired that I was responsible for operating and scaling, and I had virtually no e-commerce experience, had too much responsibility for what I frankly knew. It was the pandemic, and we were well funded, and the company grew like a rocket ship, 10x in like 18 months. It was crazy. And at that point, we went from like 100 people to 1,000 people like a year, and everything started breaking at the company. And as one of the earlier brand managers there, who was involved in a lot of different kind of cross-functional projects, I just like saw all these problems that I wanted to help work on and fix. And so I sort of raised my hand and became one of the founding members of our strategy and ops team at the company that was responsible for, I mean, at the time, the big mandate was efficiency and restructuring. And so that's like a big project that I got to work on. Very stressful, kind of depressing, but that was a really important experience. And then did that like strategy and ops, biz ops work for a little bit, and really wanted to kind of take that and take my various experiences and interests and do something more early stage, something that felt more like building versus like optimizing and fixing. And I didn't really enjoy just living in spreadsheets all the time, and so chief of staff felt a little bit more my speed. That's sort of what pulled me in this direction.
Yeah, I like that. And that's another one of those through lines. You're resourceful. You just have to figure things out. Like you didn't have e-commerce experience, but you just like figured it out and made it happen. And then also being proactive. That's something I'm always telling people chiefs of staff have to be proactive. So like raising your hand to join the strategy and ops team. That's like classic chief of staff stuff. But like being in the role with all of the different ideas about what a chief of staff is, knowing that it's so nebulous and ambiguous at sometimes, have you come across any misconceptions about the role?
Yeah, I mean, I think like there are probably as many different chief of staff job descriptions as there are chiefs of staff, and so I think definitely from like the hiring manager side, when I was interviewing for the role before and had talked to other people who were thinking about hiring a chief of staff, like sometimes people see it as more of an operational sort of EA job. Sometimes people see it as more of a program manager job or like even corporate relations or something. And, it can be all of that, right? It sort of just depends on the role. And so, yeah, first of all, is I think somebody's seeing it from one angle and thinking that's sort of what a chief of staff is, but in reality, it's much more nebulous. And then I think that I've talked to a lot of folks who are sort of aspiring chiefs of staff who might see it as almost like biz ops or strategy and ops, but like the next level up, like it's some sort of level on a career ladder almost in that position. And it's absolutely not that. And that's something that I think I would emphasize is like it's not sort of like the ultimate destination of like the MBA or strategy and ops person who wants more responsibility. It's actually a bit of a side path from that. And like if you're really successful in say biz ops, you might or might not enjoy the chief of staff role. And so it is different, I guess. It's like a different flavor of that sort of skill set.
Yeah, that's a really important flag. So I appreciate you mentioning that. It's such a great career. It's a launch pad for so many other things. It can also be a great, rewarding career just to stay in the chief staff role. But yeah, it is interesting how people think that it progresses. And it's like, no, not necessarily. But so being a chief of staff for a year, what's been some of the more rewarding aspects of that?
I mean, I think going from what was effectively like a prototype product to something that's used now by a lot of paying customers, including Fortune 500 companies, is really cool. Raising money and sort of basically building a startup from zero is awesome and super rewarding. But more on like a micro level, I think, yeah, just going back to like setting things up from zero is awesome. Being able to like talk to customers and really kind of tangibly see the relationship between all the stuff that we're doing on like behind the curtains and how that impacts people's work and lives and businesses is really awesome. And just personally, I mean, it's been a period of a lot of growth. Yeah, just this position, it's hard. It's really hard to build 0 to 1, and like we're not there yet. I mean, we're pre-product market fit. We're like very much so on that journey. We've gone a good distance, but we're absolutely not all the way there. But like getting to this point and feeling like, yeah, I've gone from not really being able to sell anything, to save my life to being able to like actually sell and close deals, being able to market the product. I think that's been really rewarding as well to look back on the last, 18 months or so.
Yeah, and that growth is a really cool part of being a chief of staff because you are working across departments. You're hands on so many different things. You're really able to not only like grow the company, but grow yourself and your own skills because you're seeing like all aspects of it. And a lot of people use that as an opportunity to like, I'm exposed to sales and I actually really love this. Let me explore that further, or marketing. And I didn't realize this was so interesting to me. Do you see yourself sort of staying in this area of like strategy and ops, chief of staff, or do you see yourself going to a different sort of field or direction?
It's a great question. I wish I knew. I think, uh, my role at Omni, like I've been chief of staff like since I came on full time, but like the actual job description has changed, every 3 months, like completely. And so to some extent, I'm just kind of going with the flow and trying to like, just add as much value as I can as we go along, like not thinking too much about like what's next because, frankly, it's like at this stage, you really have to succeed today Otherwise, there won't be a tomorrow.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So that's like the number one thing. But I think if I do step back a little bit, no way am I going to become a full time salesperson. That's just not my thing. Like I like it a little bit, not that much. And I'm not nearly as good as many of the actual full time salespeople who use our product. They're way better than I am. I could definitely see a day. It's like, look, we hit $1 million ARR, $1 million MRR, raise one, two, three more rounds, company scales. Like, yeah, sure. I think a lot of the sort of next step for chiefs of staff is like leading some department, customer support or biz ops or account management or product or what have you. And so sure, yeah, I could see that kind of thing. But I also feel like, this experience so far has given me a lot of confidence that 5, 10 years, whatever from now, I could start my own business and I could sell it, I could run it. And the sorts of questions I would have in the back of my mind just aren't as, I've sort of proven to myself, like, yeah, you can do this really hard thing, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I'm also always telling people if you want to be an entrepreneur one day, if you want to start your own company one day, but of course, like today you need a job or you don't have an idea yet, being a chief of staff is such a great position for that
Yeah.
because you're literally shoulder to shoulder, right hand with the CEO, the founder, watching them build it and sort of learning like, okay, what are the best practices and building those processes and just seeing how they're, how problems are being solved, how decisions are being made, really getting like a really clear view of the entire org, as opposed to some people who might have a great idea, they want to be a founder, but they don't like have any exposure to what does marketing look like, what does comms look like, what does sales look like.
Yeah, totally. Because like I think about in the back of my head, I think I have this sort of mental model of like what building a startup entails. There's like it's like a triangle, right? There's building and engineering on one side. There's selling and growth on the other corner. And then the third corner is like scaling, right? And I've always known, or not always, but I coming into this like I can do the scale thing. I know that, right? And I'm not an engineer. I can do a little bit, but I'm not really that technical. I'm not a full time engineer by any means. And so yeah, being able to sort of say like, hey, I have this other thing that I like have been exposed to, and I think this is true of a lot of people in operating sort of roles where it's like I've never really been one for putting myself out there, like fairly introverted and whatever, and so putting content on social media and selling. Honestly, at first it was so painful. It was just like, but I got to do it, right? And just having that forcing function behind you of like, look, you got to do this, otherwise the company's not going anywhere, is a powerful motivator. And you get over that like first painful hump of really sucking, and then eventually it's not so bad.
Yeah, and that's a really important sort of message too, because a lot of people are, especially for us chiefs of staff, we're really comfortable being behind the scenes. We're really comfortable, like we can be strategic and we can pull up our sleeves and get involved in everything, but we feel more comfortable often sort of behind the scenes and supporting like a leader. It's so important to be aware of that and to know that like you're a leader also and you can position yourself in that way. And there's so many benefits to doing that positioning. I also struggled with that. People don't believe it, but I'm like, I'm an introvert. I'd rather be behind the scenes. But I realize the value of like for you, it's getting Aomni, like getting the message about Aomni out to people so that you can sell, so that you can continue existing as a company. And to me, it's like I'm very passionate about the chief of staff profession. But for both of us, if we just stay quiet and keep that to ourselves, no one's going to hear about it. And like, we're not going to accomplish our ultimate goal. So yeah, it's important to like get over that initial sort of pain point. And then I love that that's also something that's going to help you in the future too, as you one day come up with your own organization or company, or your startup. You're going to have that experience. Like it's not going to be scary anymore.
Yeah, right. It's like, it's a powerful reminder to say like, look, like this is something that I really care about, right? I'm putting all of my effort, all of my heart into this. Investors have put millions of dollars behind us. Like friends and former coworkers have put thousands of dollars behind us. And like, we're really going to let this company not succeed because posting something cringy on LinkedIn is too embarrassing, or like, we don't want to be salesy. It's like, just do it. Like, come on,
Yeah, no, you're like
do it authentically, right? Like, there's definitely a line between like kind of spammy and authentic, like whatever. That's ultimately not going to help you succeed. At least not for me. You have to find your authentic voice in like, yeah, selling as somebody who's far more accustomed to being behind the scenes. But if you're joining like an early stage startup as a chief of staff, even if you have a salesperson, and we're going to hire a full-time salesperson soon, that I'm very excited for, but like you still represent the company. You're one of like three people who really represent the company in a big way. And like when you go to an event, when you talk to anybody, you're ultimately kind of selling, right? Even if you're not consciously doing it. And so being able to like represent yourself, represent the company well, is important.
Yeah, yeah, the chief of staff role really is like an external liaison. So you are representing the company. And if you really want to maximize that, your sort of effectiveness in that capacity and that, hat that we wear of all the many hats, you do have to put yourself out there
Mm-hmm.
and understanding like the why behind it of like, we've got to spread this mission. We've got to get this, company to market. We've got to like make more sales.
Yeah.
When you have that in mind, it makes it a lot easier to sort of branch out and put yourself out there. So, Sawyer, you've shared like some really great insights and your perspective on things. I'm curious, what would your advice be to someone who's interested in becoming a chief of staff?
I think it really depends on kind of where somebody's coming from, right? Like, I think I typically hear about like two categories of people who like really want to be a chief of staff. One is sort of like somebody who's been a startup operator for a while, whether it's they're a salesperson, they're a strategy and ops, they're this or that, right? But they've been doing some sort of like startup function, and they want to do chief of staff as like a next opportunity. And for that group, I would say like there's no magical skill set that like you need. You don't need an MBA. You don't need like it's you need to be able to demonstrate like the basic skills of effective prioritization, communication, structured thinking, all that stuff, right? That if you want to do this job, you probably have, or at least you are working on. And the best place to look for the role is internally, honestly. If there's no chief of staff, or if the chief of staff, I mean, chief of staff honestly tends to be a fairly short-lived job, because you tend to sort of go into it and then the company scales and you sort of hop into something else. And so like those opportunities are great to get if you can. Or the other way is like kind of, I think what I did is, you know what I would recommend is like see if you could do something on a fractional or freelance basis for a bit. And chief of staff is such a trust based role that like being able to work with someone for both sides, for like the executive who's hiring you and yourself, is so important to understand if it's going to be a fit. And so I think going that route, or basically becoming a chief of staff, or looking for opportunities where the people you'll be working with well and you've worked with them before, is just you're going to set yourself up for success far better than if you just go through like an application kind of interview process, because of the unique nature of the job. Like it's so trust based, it's so personal. So that's one. And then the other side of it is like people who come from maybe like a more like corporate, like MBB kind of management consulting background, or investment banking. And I think the common pitfall there is like it's sort of a title thing, where it's like I'm coming from this job and I want to hop into chief of staff because it's like the sort of prestigious hot job of the moment or whatever. And I would say like you got to be a good operator. This job, at least at an early stage company, and this will be different if I'm sure like the chief of staff at Calendly or Canva or you know Unilever or whatever is a different skill set and different day to day than what I have. But like at a startup, a chief of staff is at least 50%, if not like 80%, like execution. You have to be great at execution, and you have to prove yourself. Like I don't think you'll be able to find a role without having proven yourself doing it. And so the best thing to do is like find a role at a startup where you can execute, right? Like strategy and ops is a good entry point into that. Product is a good entry point into that. Starting your own company, honestly, and like being somewhat successful is a great entry point. And I think that's the best way to do it, because that's typically like the hardest part for people to get accustomed to.
Yeah, and that's really great advice because you're right. A lot of people, the chief of staff like title is sort of hot and popular right now, and a lot of people are wanting to jump into it and not realizing, hey, this is a hands-on role. This is like, I think, I mean, of all the chiefs of staff I've spoken to across different org types, like you're getting, as a chief of staff, you're rolling up your sleeves and you're getting work done. You might not be the one that's always doing it, but you're creating something, creating a system so that someone else can get the work done. But yeah, it's not like a consultant position. It is like actual executing.
No, like people would be amazed at the amount of like stupid bullshit that I have to do. Like just because like, it's every like, you talk about, oh, doing a seed fundraise, that sounds cool, right? It's like selling product, that sounds cool. Being on a podcast like this, it's really cool. But like we used to run a Discord and somebody like, and people would like join the like bots would join the Discord and like post porn, and I had to like go moderate our Discord like every once in a while, and then eventually we just gated it because it was too annoying. But like, like stuff like that where it's like, whose responsibility is that? Well, it's yours, right? And just other things like that that are like tedious and not glamorous and required though. Like because I think people get into this mindset when you consume a lot of like productivity, like operations sort of startup content where it's like you should always be doing high priority things, like focus on prioritization. It's like, yeah, but like sometimes the low value stuff just needs to get done because you can't never do it. And so you do spend a lot of time doing that, and you try to outsource where possible and all of that, but like often your resources and capacity to outsource are just limited, so it's up to you to fill out the dumb forms and do all the sort of operational things that you don't want to do.
Yeah, you've got to be comfortable getting your hands dirty,
Yeah.
whatever might come up.
Oh my god. Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy. You probably don't have that listed on your resume, but
No, and thankfully the Discord is now blocked so you don't have to deal with that one anymore. But
well, Sawyer, you've been so helpful, just like really illuminating so much about the chief of staff profession for us. I really appreciate you. Are there any like parting words you want to share? Any parting thoughts that you want to add to the conversation?
well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This was super fun. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Parting words, man. I don't know. I think it's a really fun position. It's a really stressful position. Would highly recommend it to anyone who is really passionate about building companies and kind of treating a company as like a product almost that you're crafting. And you know, I think there are many different pathways in, and there are many different flavors of chief of staff. And so, I guess my parting advice or perspective or whatever would be like, you know, treat it almost like you're trying to get like a freelance role at first, right? Like the sort of work to hire, try before you buy route. I think whether that's like full-time employment into the role, fractional into the role, freelance into the role, something like that, I think is really the best approach for anyone, especially at the startup level. And I think if you go that route, you'll be eventually set up for success.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sawyer.
Yeah, thank you.